The Buccaneers have been conducting interviews for their offensive coordinator position, and the fans should be excited about some of these candidates. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. I am your host, James Yarcho, writer over at Bucs Report. He is Evan Klosky on 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app. And I, of course, am here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. For that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. Evan is going to break down who he thinks the best fit at offensive coordinator would be, and we talk about whether or not Todd Bowles did enough in terms of changes to the defensive staff, all coming up in a little bit. But Evan, since the last time we spoke, there have been some changes to the coaching landscape. Mike McDaniel was fired. Mike Tomlin stepped down, which will likely lead to some of the coaches on his staff becoming available, which could come in handy when you're looking to replace some of these position coaches that Todd Bowles let go. But as far as the Bucs offensive coordinator position is concerned, that's where I want to start this conversation. And they have, conducted some of these interviews already. You have Mike Kafka, who was the Giants offensive coordinator and then interim head coach. Zach Robinson, he was a hot name in regards to the Bucs pretty recently, but he is coming off being the offensive coordinator in Atlanta, comes from the Sean McVay tree, of course. Israel Wolfork, the quarterback coach out there in Arizona, the Lions pass game coordinator David Shaw, and then former Titans head coach and Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. So as you take a look at what the Bucs have done so far, what do you kind of make of this search and the kind of candidates that they're looking at?
Well, first off, the first few people were coaches who actually know what the Buccaneers looked like in 2025. The Titans, they saw in the preseason and had joint practice against the Cardinals. They played, obviously, Zach Robinson. They played Lions and David Shaw. They played. So there's a little bit of some intimate knowledge there. You also have to, be prepared for a QB coach to come in as well. And it doesn't hurt to do your due diligence on that front. And also in these early interviews, I just think you are, generally speaking, doing that due diligence of just plucking minds from people you've heard about or about and want to learn a bit more. Certainly, like in the case of David Shaw, a respected football figure who I believe was the passing game coordinator for the Lions this season. So I don't read too much into the early interview process because when the Buccaneers hired Liam Cohen, he was number 7 in terms of interviews. Dave Canales was number 10 in terms of interviews. Like, there's no harm in doing a bunch of interviews because it's information gathering as well. Now, you can't wait too long, especially when I think up to 13 teams are looking for play callers. But, this is a scenario where you actually get to go across like enemy lines in a way and learn a little bit about yourself and also maybe a little bit about other teams and how they're doing stuff. So, take advantage of that.
Yeah, well, and I know a lot of people, when I talked about Brian Callahan, for example, a lot of people were not thrilled with that idea. You saw it on social media. I saw it in the comment section on that episode. But you take a look at kind of what he had to work with there in Tennessee. Whoever takes that Tennessee head coaching job is in, for a very long process to get that team turned around. And my big thing was, if Brian Callahan's running the same kind of offense that Zach Taylor is in Cincinnati. When you put that offense with the weapons in Tampa, that could look pretty nice. It could be pretty dangerous. So I think when a lot of people hear, oh, well, Atlanta's offense wasn't that great and Zach Robinson didn't know how to use Bijan Robinson, or, Kyler Murray is terrible. Why would they talk to the quarterback coach of the Cardinals? Or, the Lions offense wasn't nearly as good as it was. I think a lot of times people get a little too tied up in where these coaches are coming from compared to what the coaches actually want to do and maybe weren't able to at their last stop.
Yeah, I think that it has to mean a little bit, but also I wouldn't get so carried away with all the names you get in there. There's a lot of reasons why teams and situations didn't work out. And you have to remember, let's say with Brian Callahan, if they were to bring him in, they're not asking Brian Callahan to be the head coach of the team, which is what he failed to do with the Titans for a myriad of reasons. They want him to be the offensive coordinator and just call plays. But having said that, when the Titans hired Brian Callahan wasn't really the play caller for Cincinnati.
Sure.
And I think that's a cautionary tale for a lot of people out there who throw Udinsky out there and, Shieldhouse not quite in the same category, because Udinsky has not called plays in the NFL. He's actually not called plays, period. And you just saw what that looked like with Josh Grizzard. Josh Grizzard, up-and-coming mind, and I think he did a lot of things well. When you look at the statistics of the season, they're not much different than what Dave Canales did 2 years ago, and everyone loved Dave. But, you need to grow into that. The only way to learn is getting thrown into the fire, and you also need to be given a situation to fail a little bit. And, I feel like Josh didn't have any room to fail, and that kind of what burnt him in the butt. But you would imagine that for Todd, especially for a guy who knows his butt is on the hot seat, could not be hotter. He needs to win. It needs to be immediate. He's not going to take a risk with someone who hasn't been in the trenches before calling plays. I don't think he's going to go through that experience again. So also keep that in mind when they bring in people. It's like you have to have play calling experience. I would be shocked unless, and by the way, Nathan Shieldhouse is a guy who called plays at Iowa State for a year. I would be shocked if the guy who gets hired by the Buccaneers does not have play calling experience and a decent amount of it.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's something that I've been keeping an eye on. And it's like, Liam hadn't called plays in the NFL, but he called plays in Kentucky.
He called plays.
Yeah, Dave, that was his first experience, with all of that. So with Todd Bowles being in the situation that he's in, yeah, I'm 100% with you. Is he willing to take that risk? Because right now he's batting or shooting 50%. As far as hiring these offensive coordinators that have not been play callers in the past. But I'll tell you what, Evan, a couple of guys that have called plays and called quite a few of them, Mike McDaniel and Todd Monken. Monken is coming in for an interview on Wednesday. Mike McDaniel, he's taking a lot of interviews, just none scheduled with the Bucs quite yet. But there are still some splash candidates out there. So which one is the best fit for this team right now? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit? You know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Indeed sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes the real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. It works right from your phone or computer, and you can even keep your existing number. And Quo's smart AI tools automatically log calls, summarize conversations, and highlight next steps so details never slip through the cracks. It's no surprise that Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity and no customer slips away. Try Quo for free. Plus, get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen to view every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I know the All Access members are looking forward to the All 22 breakdown of whoever the new offensive coordinator is going to be. You're not going to want to miss that, so be sure to check out the All Access info. The link is in the show notes. We have Mike McDaniel hype train going a million miles an hour. Yeah, he's got, last I saw reported, 5 interviews lined up. I think 4 of them are for a head coaching job. One is for the Lions offensive coordinator job. There is still some hope and some teasing from Jeff Darlington that he's going to be an OC and potentially be one in Tampa. Jeff Darlington keeps throwing Tampa out there like a lot anytime he talks about Mike McDaniel. But one of the other big fish on the market is someone that the Bucs are certainly familiar with. That is Todd Monken, who will have an in-person interview with the Bucs on Wednesday. We talked about some guys already in this episode, but Evan, when you take a look at the other coaches that are out there that maybe they haven't interviewed with the Bucs yet, but you're taking a look at the way this coaching carousel is going around, who are the guys that you look to and just think, man, that is really a great fit for what he wants to do offensively and what the Bucs have here on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I mean, look, Mike McDaniel would be a home run hire.
Oh, yeah.
There's also a sliver of me that thinks if you can bring in McDaniel, is there a chance that maybe you can circle back with Grizzard and say, hey, why don't you come back into that passing role? Specialist role. It's very doubtful. Just like the Kevin Patullo thing where they, a lot of people
he was fired but not fired.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you can come. It just typically when you get fired, you move on to a new experience, right? Because where's the upward mobility? But just because, and here's the thing with McDaniel is that Grizzard's offense is Liam Cohen with a twist of McDaniel, because that's who he learned under before the 1 year of Liam. And he spent a lot more time in Miami than he did in Tampa Bay. McDaniel should have the bones of the offense. Like, okay, I see what you're doing here. This looks familiar. And it shouldn't be like this gross overhaul of the system, So that would be a huge home run in McDaniel. I think everybody out there would agree. I do like Todd Monken a lot. I think Todd Monken is uber experienced. He had tons of success at the collegiate level with back-to-back titles with Georgia. Then he went to Baltimore, and I know this year was a bit disjointed. I don't find it coincidental that it happened in a season where Lamar Jackson had a ton of injuries. But he's always had an elite rushing attack as the OC of the Ravens. And before we got to talking, you mentioned, well, it's a little bit skewed because of Lamar and what you're able to do there. And that is fair. But, even in 2019 when he was with the Browns, it was, I think, a top 12 rushing attack. And that's just yards per game. I didn't want to break it up into yards per rush, which is what I typically do, because in the end, if we're talking about quarterbacks, non-quarterbacks, like those stats are also baked in anyway. So I'm not really making a different point. But the thing with Monken is he is going to believe in the rushing attack. He's going to have way more weapons at wide receiver than what he had in Baltimore. And I think the offense that he had in Georgia might be a little bit closer to the offense he would run in Tampa Bay versus what he was doing with Lamar Jackson. But considering, A, Todd Bowles will let him run that sucker and not step on his toes. B, he knows Baker Mayfield, and by all accounts, that's been a good relationship in the past. C, you've seen success before, and D, he's going to lean into the rushing attack with, the stud offensive linemen that should all be returning for the Buccaneers. They never got one snap together in 2025. You bring them all back. I mean, Monken's got a lot to work with, including Bucky, and I would imagine, that's either Sean Tucker and Josh Williams, or somewhere in there they can add another running back, whether that's in the 7th round or undrafted like they did with Sean Tucker. There are some options here. I think we all know the Rachaad White train has left the station. But, yeah, I mean, to me, those are the top two in my head. With then, if you can bring in a Steelhouse, I think that's great. But I just don't think that's what Todd Bowles is looking for. So I don't really put as much weight in it. But they've interviewed him in the past. I would try to interview him again. I think he's highly sought after. So, those are kind of the three names in my head of where I think if it happened, I would be like, the Buccaneers crushed this. Like, fans super stoked and forget about all the angst towards Todd Bowles. And, like, let's dig deep into this 2026 team.
Yeah, because the Bucs, correct me if I'm wrong, but they interviewed him, and then he chose the Ravens job, and it was shortly after that the Bucs hired Canales, right? He chose Baltimore first, and then the Bucs went with Dave.
Yes, from what I understand, the Bucs wanted Monken, and he turned them down because between the Buccaneers, who had Todd Bowles, who looked like a lame duck, no quarterback situation really, except maybe Baker. We didn't know, Baker and Kyle Trask were in that QB competition that I always put in italics because it was never a competition, even though they told us it was. And yeah, so he chose Lamar Jackson, who's an MVP candidate. Sure. I mean, I don't know how anyone can blame him for that. But now going back into the swing of things, the fact that the Buccaneers are bringing him in person definitely makes it feel like they want him to feel the love. And you've pursued him before, you offered before. First off, he's accepted before. And the fact that he keeps coming back, there has to be some sort of mutual respect here, not only between the coaching staff that's currently there, but also the Glazer family, that there's a comfort level.
Yeah, and I think any hesitations that he had back in 2023, because, you said it perfectly. There was that competition. We didn't know who Baker was going to be, right? Was he going to be the Baker that led the Browns to their first playoff win since, the JFK administration? Or was he going to be the one that we saw being a practice squad defensive end for Carolina and then being jettisoned off to the Rams? So I can understand the hesitation that, you have Lamar or you have a big old question mark. Obviously, it was smart to go with Lamar. Now he's seen that, Baker can be part of the MVP conversation. He could put up 40 touchdowns in a season, might help with that decision making a little bit. I'll dive more into the Todd Monken interview and situation and everything on tomorrow's episode. But this offensive coordinator job, I know it's getting all the headlines. I know it's getting all the attention, but it's not the only one available. However, should there be more jobs than there are on the Bucs staff as of right now? We're going to talk about that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing payroll spreadsheets. That's where Gusto comes in, to take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all from one place without the hassle or hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly prices, which means no surprise changes at the end of the month, and knowing you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you real peace of mind. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/lockedonnfl and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's right, 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/lockedonnfl. One more time, that's gusto.com/lockedonnfl. The divisional round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get in on the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets that you like the most. Open your profit boost pack first thing on game day and see what boosts you want to apply. You make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. The Seattle Seahawks are the favorites to win the Super Bowl at plus 270, followed by the Los Angeles Rams at plus 320, then the New England Patriots and Buffalo Bills both at plus 600. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP edition of Locked On Bucs, and the Buccaneers have 7 different vacancies to fill on the coaching staff if you include the offensive assistant vacancy left by Tom Moore in his retirement. Some of these are on the defensive side of the ball, right? Defensive line coach, cornerbacks coach, safeties coach. But the question that a lot of people are asking, and the one that I'm going to ask you, Evan, is whether or not Todd Bowles made enough changes on that side of the ball to really make a difference. You still have a lot of the same old faces, same old philosophies there to run Todd Bowles' same scheme. So should there be optimism that the defense will improve because of some of the changes along the defensive line coach, the safeties coach, cornerbacks coach, or are we kind of stuck in a holding pattern until we know what kind of players they're going to add to that side of the ball in at least free agency and potentially even the draft?
The latter, that part. I have to be objective here, and it's certainly going to be addressed when we're able to talk with Jason Light, Todd Bowles again. But they fired Josh Grizzard and Thad Lewis, right? They fired the number one position with the offense, and then they also fired a key part of Baker Mayfield and you know that quarterback room. Then you go over to the defensive side of the ball. They kept the defensive play caller. They kept his right-hand man in Larry Foote. They kept his left-hand man in George Edwards. Also, Mike Caldwell, who was in, out, now back in, he remains there. Whoever they hire at the position coaches, what say are they going to have in the day-to-day game plan? You can hope for better results from just coaching better, which, you know, Todd, these are all your coaches, and they're all kind of your yes men. These are all people you've been around your entire life pretty much. Like, you know, the guys like the Kevin Ross and the Nick Rapones, been there forever with Todd Bowles. George and Larry, been around Todd forever. Like, he needs fresh ideas. He needs people who might push him into different directions. And he needs some youthful exuberance on this coaching staff, especially defensively, when there are schemes out there that are more creative than yours. And the fact is, you don't perform well against playoff type teams. You don't perform well against the best offensive minds in the league. You have a midseason slump every year. And you typically work better off of long breaks than when you have short breaks. That's why entering the year, the Buccaneers start off like gangbusters, because Todd does reinvent himself a little bit in the offseason. And then it's, people catch up to it. And then he's like, oh, crap, they caught up to it. And then outside of this year, typically he's figured out how to wiggle out of it. This time he couldn't. And it's just like, I don't understand. You held the top mind of the offense accountable. If this was a defensive coordinator position from 2022 to now, the defensive coordinator would have been fired twice over. Like, there's no reason why you shouldn't be having a new voice in your left or right ear telling you stuff, and to have the same brain trust is, to me, I don't know how fans can think that there's going to be this grandiose change. We have seen it now. We know what's coming. So unless Jason Light is going to transform dramatically the front seven of the defense, what is there left to see from Todd Bowles, and how are the expectations going to be any different? And, I welcome being proved wrong on that front. And again, I leave the asterisk of the personnel. The personnel can certainly change my mind of how this will all go. But I don't know how you can convince me this is a top 15 defense next year without like crazy turnover luck and wiggling around with the sacks again, which took a step back this year more than it ever has under Todd Bowles. So, there's part of me that says, do I exaggerate 8 games of a season versus kind of what the other 8-9 games were? Or is it just, in the end, when all of it's said and done, no matter how it looks at the start, end, middle, whatever, when you take a 17-game sample size, we know what it's going to look like. And I'm starting to lean towards that.
Todd Bowles is 62 years old. Now, I don't know about your life experience, Evan, but in my life experience, having worked in multiple senior communities, actually, both assisted and unassisted living centers, I don't know a whole lot of 62-year-old people that all of a sudden are going to change their mind about anything. So that tells me that it doesn't matter who you're bringing in, unless the Glazers had said, look, you have to bring in a dedicated defensive coordinator to help you with this. I don't think anything on the defense is going to change from last year to next year.
There'll be tinkers.
As you pointed out, it'll depend on who the personnel is. You bring in Max Crosby or Trey Hendrickson. You bring in Matt Milano or Quay Walker or Nakobe Dean. Now we can start to have a different conversation, because we've seen Todd with this defense with some weapons. But I want to be optimistic about the coaching changes amongst the defensive side of the ball. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's the same voices in his ears between his right hand and left hand man. And so it's probably going to be a lot of the same stuff.
I would have been okay with Todd Bowles remaining the play caller, because there's a part of me that says, what's the point of Todd even being there if he's not going to call plays, right? So I kind of understand it from that standpoint, but also I would have thought that you would have changed one of your top coordinators, their coordinators, I guess, essentially. I would have changed if you would have changed one of them so that you can get just a different viewpoint, which also gives you a higher quality of a hire to make, because you can put a title next to their name and figure it out. So Look, I mean, it's a prove-it year for Todd Bowles. We always talk about Baker Mayfield's chip on his shoulder, which he's going to have again after the performance this past season. Todd Bowles is going to have a massive chip on his shoulder. Massive chip. He's going to have to prove a lot of people wrong.
I hope he capitalizes on it the same way that Baker did. But that is going to do it. That is going to do it for this episode. Evan, what do we have going on over at 10 Tampa Bay, 10tampabay.com, and the 10 Tampa Bay Plus app?
Sadly, the blitz is over.
Oh.
But the show moves on because the Tampa Bay Lightning are a wagon.
Yeah, they are.
Look, you can head to 10 Tampa Bay News, our app. You can get our sportscast there, the Ultimate Florida Sports Show as well. You can stream it on whatever device you have. And then always hit me up at eKlosky, WTSP. Always willing to go back and forth on topics, whatever you want to discuss.
All right. Yep. Make sure you're checking all of that out. Follow on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at Yarcho_Bucs, at eKlosky WTSP, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs. Both of those places. Check out the Everydayer Club and the All Access tier, lockedonbucs.supercast.com. Subscribe on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support the show, but you don't want to join the Everydayer Club because I don't know why, because the Everydayer Club's awesome. It's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.